We'll get started. Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome to Outspoken, and what a somber joy it is. You'll see why I say somber to have as our guest the incomparable Jekielek of the Epoch Times, and now most recently of Killed to Order: China's organ harvesting industry and the true nature of America's biggest adversary. Welcome, Mr. Jekielek.
Naomi, it's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Well, I assume since you called me Naomi, I can call you Jan.
Absolutely. I expect it.
Okay, good. We're old friends, but also I'm such an admirer of Jan's work at the Epoch Times. If you don't have a subscription to the Epoch Times, you need to subscribe and follow Jan's work. It's an invaluable independent voice. He's an extraordinary interviewer. But more importantly, the book that Jan has just brought out from Skyhorse Press, Killed to Order, is one of the most disturbing, maybe the most important book I've read in the last 5 years, for sure. And interestingly, we had Jamie Glazov on recently, and his book about tyranny is a perfect, United in Hate is a perfect dovetail to this. But this is absolutely terrifying. It's about organ harvesting. And I dreaded picking it up because you're always right. And I knew that you would fill in the picture of a rumored trafficking in organs by China, America's biggest adversary, that would make me never see the world or that issue the same way again. That's just what you've done. So let me start with a question I'm sure you're asked all day long. What led you to grapple with this very, very, very disturbing, difficult subject?
I started out in the China human rights field more broadly, right? And so I very quickly learned in the early 2000s that the Chinese Communist Party, that China under the Chinese Communist Party was not liberalizing, contrary to the narratives we were supposed to believe. The money we were putting into China was not turning them into more of a democracy, even though everybody believed it, by the way. The Republican, Democrat, it didn't really matter. It was really kind of shocking to discover this as I stumbled into this world of China atrocities under the Chinese Communist Party. I knew they were torturing people in horrible ways to re-educate them, to transform them, to break them, to make them sort of renounce their faith. I knew all these realities. So when in 2006, I had heard some rumors, by the way, about this organ industry in those sort of early 2000s, but I didn't really think much about it because I didn't see evidence. Part of the reason was what you just mentioned, actually, Naomi, which is that when you hear about something this macabre, this is not your sort of standard organ trafficking, horrible as it is in some black market situation in India or wherever, right? This is a whole different level. And so you kind of, partially you don't want to believe it. So when you're not given something very concrete, you just sort of shelf it, right? For another time, because you have to grapple with it, right?
Right.
So 2006 was really when there were near simultaneously, two whistleblowers that came out. One was an Israeli transplant surgeon who had a patient who had gone to China and gotten a new heart in 2 weeks, scheduled. Okay, so that's like 100% something horrible is happening there. But is it one-off? But one-off is hard because 2 weeks. How did that happen, right?
Right.
And then the other allegation was a woman whose pseudonym is Annie. Her husband was a transplant surgeon, and he had confessed to his wife after several years of really bad relationship and him having nightmares, and she was going to leave, that he had extracted 2,000 corneas from living people. Okay. And this kind of happened near, I know I say it so casually as if it were, it's not funny at all, but I've just gotten desensitized to it because I've had to, basically look into the face of evil, so to speak, for a number of years now. But when those two totally independent sort of bits of evidence came into the picture, and these David Kilgore and David Matus, two incredible researchers, were some of the heroes of exposing this movement. They did an initial report where they found 17 lines of evidence some of which came from these two whistleblowers that all pointed in the same direction to a real organ harvesting industry at scale, killing people for organs, and no explanation as to some sort of a normal transplant industry. Like there was just simply no credible information in China at all that there was any sort of normal at scale organ industry. So we realized this is the, and of course when challenged and said, hey, okay, so how are you doing organ transplants, China? They just said, you guys are evil. They didn't say, oh, here's our industry, right? They basically just attacked the messenger. And in fact, even until today, they have provided no credible response to where this mass organ industry, 60 to 90,000 organ transplants a year, where those organs come from. So that's a bit of a long answer, but there it is.
So you realized that year when those two whistleblowers came forward that there was not just smoke but fire, that there was evidence of something that goes beyond the baseline. Now, you mentioned two situations that we should be familiar with in order to understand how different and other and extraordinary the Chinese situation is that you've revealed. First, what is normal organ harvesting, right? And second, what is black market organ harvesting, and how does China then differ from both of those?
Well, in a normal situation, okay, and by the way, the normal situation can have its own serious ethical issues, and does indeed. HHS has decertified 2 major transplant systems in America in 2005, or it's 2025. So the way it happens is someone basically has to have let's pretend I need a heart, okay? Mm-hmm. Someone has to have a catastrophic accident that they're not coming back from, right. Okay? And they have to match my blood type, my tissue, my histology tissue type, and my kind of size. There's a sort of a size reality as well. And so to get that to match, even though there's some increased, anti-rejection drugs, like bodies don't like foreign things being put into them, so you have to kind of deal with that. It's rare, right? Because also, right, you can't transplant from someone that might come back, right? People have really bad accidents and they live and they come on. You're not going to harvest from a person, right, who that's happened to. But so and this is actually where, so you can't, and this is kind of a bad joke I often say, but I know we both love The Princess Bride, right? Yes. And the point is, you can't harvest from a completely dead person. You can only harvest from someone who's mostly dead. Okay. Wow. And mostly dead means that you really believe deeply, and there's a whole team that's charged with deciding this question, that they're not coming back. It means that they have to be basically brain dead, although there's debates about whether brain death is a good assessment or not. Body alive. There has to be circulation. The moment the whole body dies, those organs go bad really fast. Wow. Okay. That's why you need this typically it's car accidents, because the person is, on life support. They're not coming back because their head has been crushed or something, but their circulation is still working. That is a good candidate, right? But then people come out of comas, you see, so you have to make that call, and that's why you need a whole team of people. Some people advocate for the patient in a sense, make the argument, right? And some people say, well, no, this person's ready for harvesting. And the reason those systems were decertified back in 2025 is because they got too soft on making that decision, right? They started harvesting from people that really they shouldn't have been, because it was like that person had a much greater chance of coming back, right? Right. So that's the ethical reality around a normal system, but it's also rare. The supply is always much less than the demand because of this particular reality, right? And the US, by the way, in last year, 40,000 is the record number of transplants of any organ that have been done, of vital organs. And okay, so that's the ethical situation. Black market situation, right, is sort of, I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but you hear the urban myths. Okay, someone wakes up on ice, there's a slice in them, they're missing a kidney. Yeah, that stuff happens. Okay, there's organ trafficking of that nature that really does happen.
Right.
But again, the hard part in this situation, right, is that you have to have something that matches,
Right.
right? So you have to somehow figure that out. It's not like every kidney is gonna work for every
Right.
person, not at all, in
Right.
fact, right? So so that in this typical black market situation, that's they have some way of figuring out, so zeroing in on that possibility.
Mhm.
But it's very difficult. Now in China, it's a whole different reality. You have to have, well, first of all, there's a state actor involved. Okay, you kind of have to have this for this type of kill to organ system to actually function. Okay, because you have to be able to push coercive power through a population. You mentioned the word tyranny. You absolutely have to have a tyranny. Okay, the ability to exert tyranny, because you have to be able to dehumanize a large group of people. So you have to control the information
Mhm.
tools of the society,
Mhm.
right? Push mass propaganda.
Mhm.
Why is that important? It's important because if you're going to get people to do really bad things to other people,
Mhm.
we have to kind of trick their
Right.
psyche,
Right.
right,
Right.
into believing that they're bad or they're against you or
Right.
something, right, or
We've
lesser
seen that
than you.
before. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, this is, 1930s Germany comes to mind in terms of, the types of language that's used. Okay,
Mhm.
and then the other thing that you have to be able to do is you have to be able to incarcerate a really large number of people, and I'll explain
Yes.
why in a moment.
Right.
Okay, so if you have all of that, now you have the circumstances to be able to set up this kind of kill to order system that
Right.
China has, because, okay, you can now blood type, tissue type, and organ scan that, let's say, million people or several hundred thousand people or more in the prisons, okay, and put that into a database. And
Right.
now, if I'm an affluent person with very loose morals, I can read the ad, which, by the way, before 2006, there were actually ads online advertising 2 week times for a heart
Oh my
for
God.
200,000. I don't remember the exact numbers, but
Mhm.
very short wait times.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And because my so called donor is a prisoner of conscience who is ready to be killed to order, pre typed to match me, and the moment that I pay that money, they can be killed and shipped, or rather shipped first, then killed to order. And that's
Oh
the
my
reason that's the name of my book. Okay. And by
gosh.
the way, this is very important, right? In 1999, in China, uh, basically Falun Gong practitioners became the first group targeted in this kill to order enterprise, because there were 70 to 100 million of these people that were doing this, by government estimate,
Mhm.
that were doing this spiritual discipline. They were actually known to be unusually healthy. Don't drink, don't smoke. It actually, the practice had profound health benefits. That's part of the reason why it grew so fast in a very grassroots fashion, right? Kind of, spread by hey, this is cool, you should try it,
Right.
this kind of thing.
Right.
Became bigger than the Communist Party. They decided to crush it. It also turned out that these people were unusually resilient to being re-educated, transformed. Remember, I was talking about that, right? This is something that I was aware of. So I don't want to tell you some of the things I'm aware of, what methods they used. It's straight out of like 1984, or just, horror stories, literally, right, to get someone to break and so forth. Well, now you have this mass propaganda being pushed out to explain to the rest of the population why you should hate these people, who
Mhm.
before, by the way, were unusually, truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. This is what these people are living. So they're kind of considered to be pretty good people, right? They're kind of not causing problems, kind of helping out in society, right? Now you
Right.
have to believe that they're evil, that they're a problem, that they're attacking, whatever that is, right?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
now, and especially because it turns out they don't re-educate very easily, right? They
Mm.
don't quickly say, oh yeah, just because you made it illegal, I'm not gonna believe what I know to be true.
Right.
They incarcerated tons of them, and actually in the system, because they were so resilient, all Falun Gong deaths became known as suicides. There was this unwritten rule in the system. And now you have this environment where you have this unbelievably vulnerable group of people. They're being demonized, massively by the state. I think there were 500,000 individual pieces of propaganda at the right in the first year or something like that, to kind of to dehumanize them.
Mhm.
They're in this system. They're actually disappearing anyway because they're being tortured to death in some cases, right? And no one really understands what's going on, except some very evil person realizes, hey, wait a second, we can monetize this, right?
Mm.
Right? And
Mhm.
now These people are disappearing, but no one really understands that they're being used for organs. And that starts in 2000. And one of the reasons we know that this started is that the Chinese transplant system, with no credible source of organs, grows geometrically.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Just this massive growth. Thousands of hospitals are built, tens of thousands of transplants are done. And, by 2005, there's a bit of a plateau, but that now they've built this kind of monstrous machine of transplantation.
God. Well, it's a lot to process. I mean, as you're speaking, Jan, so many things click into place. And I'll just share like moments that were going off in my head as you spoke. The drive toward 360-degree medical surveillance, right? Like, you have to have a very comprehensive medical surveillance system, as you described, in order to do those quick matches. They're monetizing it. It sounds like a giant amount of money is at stake, right? And the profit is limited only by how many people you can, demonize, incarcerate, and murder, right? Because the demand, death is universal. So if people want to stave off death, one organ goes after another. I mean, it's potentially massive profits here. So it chills me that in America too, and all over the West, there's this drive toward like literally documenting every bit of who you are in a database that you don't control medically. And I don't know why, but I don't know all the reasons. I assumed it had to do with AI, but if what you're saying is true, maybe dissidents in America could turn into some globalists, source of a kidney someday in the future. That's one thing I thought of. The other thing I thought of is interviews I've done recently with two different parents of young adults, healthy young adults with Down syndrome, and that they were both medically murdered. You may know of one of them, Scott Shara, Grace Shara's dad. And I'm wondering if medical murders are taking place in America in order to get at the organs. And the last thing, and then I'm thinking about the drive in America, when you sign up to get a driver's license, be an organ donor, you're so wonderful. And they don't tell you that, brain dead is a term that was coined in order to make it easier to harvest organs. And then I'm thinking about all the late term abortion bills, or, neglect the baby to death bills, and about the undercover video in which Planned Parenthood officials are like boasting about, the market in fetal parts. It's not really a question, just do you want to respond or react to anything I just said?
Well, here's the reality, okay? In the New York Times last year, there was an op-ed by three physicians that was arguing for the lowering of the standards of the dead donor rule. Okay, so the type of thinking, the type of mentality that breeds this type of monstrosity, we're very far from that, by the way, here in America. That Canada, for example, is moving a lot faster in that direction by making what they call medically assisted suicide, medical assistance in dying, really euthanasia, as actually a billing code, right? This is these rare situations, 2 states, Canada and Netherlands, where they make killing someone, being killed, a billing code, like it's a medical solution to a problem. Yeah. That's where these kind of situations grow very quickly. And you can imagine people being enticed through propaganda to, for example, provide organs for someone that really needs them. Maybe you don't really need, maybe you're feeling like you're not important anymore, and your kids aren't really, paying attention to you, and you're really a burden on society, but you could actually help someone. It almost sounds benevolent, right? So anyway, I'm really worried about the Canadian situation, because I think that this is one of those realities which could be really abused for organ procurement. Okay.
Right. Well, aren't they, Jan, jumping in? Isn't Canada pushing the age of consent to MAID lower and lower and lower to healthier and healthier?
All the different sort of boundaries are being lowered systematically over time, and we could talk about the incentives around that and so forth. I find it deeply troubling, right, given what I know about sort of the epitome of this and the kill to order situation in China. In the US, I mean, I'm seeing some very aside, at the same, we have this the philosophy behind doing this kind of stuff, right? That it's sort of this is an extreme version of it. Of course, it's called utilitarian bioethics. Okay, and there's been a rise of utilitarian bioethics over the years, chronicled by an amazing man named Wesley Smith in a book called Culture of Death, which he actually wrote in 2000, then had to like fix up in 2016 because so much more so-called progress in this area had happened. This is a fascinating book, highly recommended reading, right? So this is this way of thinking, which is the greatest good for the greatest number, but that allows basically to sacrifice some for the good of the many. And then you have the situation where, someone has to be the judge of that. What is the good for the many? Right. And usually that's the good for me. Usually that's how it ends up, kind of playing out, or my cohort. But let's leave that for a moment, right? So there's been this rise in this way of thinking, right? For sure. And at the same time, we have HHS decertifying 2 transplant systems for systemic violations of the donor rule. On the one hand, that's terrible that existed. But on the other hand, this is the government saying, we're not going to do this.
Right.
So in a way, it's heading in the other direction in the US right now, which I'm very grateful for, grateful to hear. And I'm actually hoping, so HHS has actually opined on this issue of China organ harvesting after an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun by Armstrong Williams, sort of exposing this issue. The HHS Twitter, official HHS Twitter actually said, I don't remember the exact terms, but this is horrible, it should end. Which is great. First time an agency has ever kind of, said anything about this sort of thing. There's legislation, we can talk all about that and so forth. But I see kind of a positive direction because at the state level, at the federal level, there's been resolutions passed in Congress against this, but now there's actual laws that have been passed near unanimously in the House. Now they're just sitting in the Senate ready to be passed as well. And I think they might be, and I think that will be very powerful. And I think we can, at least stop our own complicity. Right.
Yeah.
It's incentive structures are perverse here, right? Because if you're someone with a lot of disposable income, in the back of your mind, you might know that you have this contingency existing, right? And that also fuels that sort of thing keep going, even if you're not the person who's ready to have someone murdered for an organ, right? But you kind of know that if push came to shove, that exists. I don't think we should have a situation where basically if you have a huge amount of money, you have unlimited organs available to you, on demand. And there's some examples of people even from the West that have taken advantage of in really egregious ways that I document in the book.
Wow. Well, I want to get to that, but first I want to pick up on what you said about a culture of death and the book you referenced. It just sounds like these bright lines that humans have had, at least for as long as there's been Judeo-Christianity, and maybe, Falun Gong and Buddhism, many religions have a very absolute sense of the sanctity of life and that death is not life, right? And that you don't, as Edna St. Vincent Millay, you don't help, you don't give a hand to death. You don't help death, right? But one of the many people who have praised your book, I mean, I've never seen so much praise, but someone named Dr. Joseph Varon gave a foreword, and he said, this changes our sense of what death is. A crime against the concept of death is how he put it. One of the most unsettling insights in this book is how forced organ harvesting distorts the definition of death itself. Is there anything more you want to say about that before we go on to, I mean, that's pretty huge, right? Like, what is this doing to our notion of death?
100%. And, just as an aside, right, Joe Varon is a fascinating character. I just want to mention him because he almost demanded to be allowed to write the foreword to this once he understood I was working on this, right? So he right now is in charge of the Independent Medical Alliance, which is a network of some of the best doctors in the world, people who put themselves on the line to treat patients during COVID when they were being told by the system not to,
Mhm.
to do things that they knew would be bad to the patients, right? And a lot of people kind of folded when this was happening, but these doctors said, you know what, I'm going to help the patients anyway. So it's a very interesting group. Joe, I think, has the record for the number of consecutive days of trying to save people who had severe COVID in the hospital. I think it's like 220
Wow.
days. I forget, some insane number of days. He has 1,000 papers published. He's also a research critical care physician, but a massive researcher. And the most interesting part, which I didn't know, which is what got him interested in this whole kill to order enterprise, is he was the doctor, part of a transplant team that would check once these ethical decisions were made. Is this person okay to be harvested from? Right, that's the explant team, as it's called, right? He was the guy who was the final check, because it's not, again, this isn't casual, right? Like, if you're going to take organs from us, so you better be damn sure, right, that this person isn't coming back. And so he would put this device down people's windpipe into the lungs, and if the person coughed, he'd be like, well, guys, I think that we made a mistake here. Please don't, we're not doing this, right?
Good.
He told me that it was much too often that when he did that test, the person would cough, basically, right? So the point was, there's always pressure, right? Remember, the supply is always a lot less than the demand, right? So this is, since that time, since he had that experience, this issue of organ harvesting has been, particularly sensitive to him, right?
Right. Wow. What a story. Go ahead.
Well, I'm not going to say a lot. I would actually recommend that people read that forward. I think it's incredibly powerful what he managed to put together. But with this question of death, right? Let me put it this way, okay? Like, about 2/3 of the book is not about the organ harvesting itself. It's about this utilitarian view of the world that's central to how the Chinese Communist Party operates. It just, in this case, it happens to work in a bioethical, right, reality, and it's around transplantation, right? But basically, people are used as instruments. People are used as fodder to be used once they've been marked as a black class, so to speak. Okay. Now, black class just means whoever the Chinese Communist Party says is the enemy at any given point. External enemy is always America, by the way. All these years that we were, putting unbelievably insane amounts of money, right? We learned recently that Apple alone pumped, more than the Marshall Plan for Europe's worth of money annually into China. Like that it's just astonishing, right? We built this all this while they're basically telling their population that America is the enemy, right? And now they're waging a people's war against America and everything. But they basically, that in this system, the supremacy and the primacy of the Chinese Communist Party and its survival is the most important issue, right? And the greatest good. See, this is why this greatest good for the greatest number thing really falls apart, right? Actually, Stalin said it best, right? If you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs. That's actually utilitarian bioethics in a nutshell, right? Any amount of atrocity is allowable as long as the supremacy of the Communist Party is maintained. Why? Because it's the greatest good. We've decided the greater good is the survival of the party. Right?
Wow.
So you want to talk about, redefinition of death. Basically, most in this system, most people and whoever at any given point, which could be anybody, is designated as the class enemy, right? Becomes basically material, raw fodder for use in a kill to order industry or any other type of industry you might imagine.
And once you cross that line, you can do it to any class of humans for any purpose. You can cannibalize people to eat. You can have sex dormitories with forced sex slaves, or rape dormitories. You can have, babies to adopt for money. I mean, there's no limit once that sanctity of life is breached in this systematic way.
And
right?
something you're just telling me, which I hadn't quite thought of, frankly, until you just said what you said. One of the methods of torture, common methods of torture against female Falun Gong practitioners, was throwing them naked into all male jail cells overnight,
Oh
with the
God.
implicit assumption that do bad things to this person,
Oh my God.
right? And so this is when you're marked this way, right? So it allows also for really extreme and destructive and horrible methods of torture. That same mentality. Yeah.
Absolutely. Good heavens. Well, I want to zero in on, one of the many shocking and mind-blowing details. So there have been experiments, your book revealed, among the Chinese Communist Party elite on longevity that go back decades. And in fact, Chinese Communist Party elite boasted that they live on average a decade longer than their Western counterparts because they experimented early on with replacing organs that were worn out. You give a creepy, terrifying example of two very senior CCP officials, one of who lived to be 110 and one who is still alive at 108. And that Chinese Communist Party kind of propaganda around longevity explicitly states that they're aiming for a 150-year lifespan. Can you talk about this? And that they make no secret that replacing the parts is part of this methodology, replacing the organs, and also that young, healthy soldiers made it a practice or were forced to contribute their blood for transfusions into their older commanding officers. Talk about that. I mean, this is just so, right? This notion you want
It's
to live forever, just replace the parts.
it's mind-blowing, right? And this is I mean, until this hot mic moment happened, maybe about 6 months ago. I have a terrible sense of the passage of time, but I think it was 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Until that happened, do you remember Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, and Kim Jong-un were walking in Tiananmen Square, observing a military parade, and they get caught on a hot mic? She says to Putin, well, when we're 70, we're just babies. I'm paraphrasing here, of course, right?
Uh-huh.
And Putin says back, through continual organ transplantation, perhaps we can achieve immortality.
Oh my God.
Okay. And she says our target is 150 years. Now, and this is where, so I've known about this elite longevity project for some time, and 150 years is kind of like the code word for it in a way, right? It's called the Project 981, by the way. But when you hear 150 years, it's connected to that elite longevity project, because indeed that is its target, right?
Right.
I had not thought this is what is kind of almost comical in a way, because again, we compartmentalize information somehow in our minds, or at least I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew there was an elite longevity project, and I know there's a murder for organs industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't connected the two in my mind. And this explained to me, oh, of course, part of the reason that they're living so longer is not the blood transfusions, as you point out. Well, it is the blood transfusions. It is better food. It is access to an elite healthcare system when most people have, one that's collapsed, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just all that. It's unlimited access to organs forever.
Jesus.
If you're a Chinese super elite, if you're one of those 11 million red card holders that has access to the entire system, I would guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's wild, right? And of course it makes sense. And there's even this very kind of weird eulogy that I once was sent a few years back that suddenly made sense to me. Okay. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what to make of it. I just knew that it was real and it existed. There was this guy eulogizing the death of an official, mm-hmm. who, and saying how amazing it was that this person had multiple organs transplanted. It's a very creepy thing, right? Wow. Yeah, no, exactly. I know. It's like there's a lot of this kind of crazy stuff that you see, and you're just like, wow, that's really creepy. Why would anyone write that?
Right.
But they did. I don't know why. I can't explain it.
Sounds like almost a status symbol.
Well, perhaps. Well, exactly, right? And or something like, look how important this person was. They could have 3 organs transplanted, right? Wow. But again, there's just sometimes there's these anecdotes. I use a lot of anecdotes. Of course, mm-hmm. I provide the extensive body of evidence in chapter 5 in the book. But mm-hmm. I think the anecdotes are very important because they're just things are done that are completely impossible without kind of a robust system of death, of this kind of death, as Dr. Varon, Joe pointed out. Yeah.
Gosh. I'm sorry. I rarely have been struck dumb in an interview, but the enormity of what you're revealing is so overwhelming. So what do you say to critics who might say, you've raised some really important issues, but, legacy media claims that rumors of organ harvesting in China are based on inconclusive evidence?
So I actually provide, I have a whole chapter dedicated to the evidence, because it's been a road, right? We started in 2006 when we realized it was real. I did some of the initial reporting then on a few of the researchers' work, and then now here we are 20 years later with and a much larger body of evidence. So I provide all that. I also have an appendix, right, for people who really, literally, I think the question you asked is something very close to a question. It's a kind of a Q&A for people that just want a kind of a quick reference, once they know what's in the book. That's one of the appendices. I'll use just a couple of examples, okay? Because I think that's the best way there's a whole China tribunal that was convened between late 2018 and early 2020 that looked at the enormous body of evidence that's available and concluded, within a few months of its long process, that they already had the evidence this was absolutely happening to a large number of people. But then they kept going and they sort of built this out. I can't give you the body. It's a very, very big, thick book. Actually, kind of like one of your recent books. It's the same thickness of looking at the Pfizer files, right? But there's a paper in the American Journal of Transplantation titled, from about 3 years ago, I think I would guess, Execution by Organ Procurement. Okay. So
Wow.
what they did, the researchers in this paper, they studied the Chinese published peer-reviewed transplant literature. Okay. What Chinese journals, and I think not just Chinese journals, but the Chinese research institutions, research that they've done, and they published the methods. Okay. They're in a very public way. They asked the question, they looked through between 2,000 and 3,000 papers. So by no means a comprehensive view. And they found 70 plus instances where the dead donor rule had been very clearly violated in the methods as they were written in these published peer-reviewed papers. What that means is a violation of the dead donor rule means, when it comes to transplantation, that the person is killed through the organs being removed.
Wow.
Okay. And so the way I read this now, so we have 70 examples where not only were people killed through the process of transplantation, but they were, for some reason, publicized to have been killed that way in the research methods of, ostensibly prestigious Chinese institutions. The way I read this is what happens, right? When something becomes institutionalized, remember, they grow this industry geometrically from 2000 to 2005. Right. And then, it's kind of, I think by 2010 or so, we have that number of 60 to 90,000 transplants a year. It's a machine, right? We've got surgeons, we've got nurses, we've got all this stuff. We've got, hundreds, if of hospitals. I don't know exact number. I think more than hundreds of hospitals, and a whole machine of intaking patients, using these disposable people. It's this massive institution, right? That's basically been created, and once something like this is created, it's actually hard to turn off, right? Because it's also, you asked about the money. A good estimate, I think, and this is taken from that 60 to 90,000 transplants a year, it's about a $9 billion annual industry. So it's a decent amount of money, right? But also, I think that the elite longevity side of it, I wonder if that's not, in a sense, worth more. Like if I would have the ability to have literally any organ near instantly provided to me when I need it, and there's, millions of people that have that privilege,
Mhm.
that feels to me worth more than $9 billion.
Right.
So it's a very, in terms of, you can see the twisted incentives for people who have no moral boundary.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I was also thinking as you were speaking, what an effective way to terrify a whole population, to know that at any point they could be turned into, the next donor,
And
right?
it's used that way. Now in China, see, this is the interesting thing, right?
Mhm.
I don't believe, from having talked to lots of people, from the mainland in recent, everyone kind of knows it as a rumor.
Mhm.
Not a lot of people, and some people believe it's fact, but they don't believe it's fact as in, like, they're 100% sure, of course, because how would you? It's a state secret. It's done in a operating room. People are killed. It's a
Mhm.
miracle that there's a survivor. I mean,
Right.
it really is truly a miracle. There's one guy that we found.
I
I
wanted
mean,
to ask you about,
yeah,
yeah,
about Cheng Pei Ming. It's that it's just an astonishing reality that he even exists, given how easy it is to hide this crime, right?
right, right.
But yeah, it's I think, but people are told in the prisons and the labor camps and this mass incarceration system that the CCP has, that they're threatened with it. Absolutely, that happens. Yeah.
Wow. Well, and everyone involved in this supply chain, you know, knows that it's happening. And I think what you were hinting at earlier is that when something becomes normalized, people talk about it as if it's normal, even if it isn't normal, right?
A
That
a- a hun- 100%. That's exactly right. I think I didn't sort of mention the punchline. I just think, when you have this kind of thing in papers and they're just publishing it, they forgot.
they forgot
They
that,
forgot that this is a problem. Yeah.
right? Exactly. Um, so tell me about this survivor. What happened to him?
Well, so his story. So of course, my wife Cindy. Well, her father Manny was a Holocaust survivor, and I know a lot about his story. We've turned it into a film,
Wonderful.
which a film I love. By the way, let me plug it for a moment. FindingManny.com if you're interested in an optimistic Holocaust documentary. I'm not kidding; it's actually optimistic. Check out FindingManny.com. That's the film about my father-in-law. I've also interviewed a number. For some reason, I've been interested in this question of crimes against humanity and how they happen and why, for example, people don't react to them, or even though some really horrible things are happening.
Mhm.
And so I've interviewed a number of Holocaust survivors over the years,
Mhm.
and they all have the story is very similar in this one respect, that really they were just about to be killed in some way or die in some way, but then something happened that just, and fate or God or
Mhm.
whatever reality, just had a different plan. Like, for example, Manny, he switched numbers with a guy because he wanted to be on the same train as his father, right?
Mhm.
Makes some sense. So he just swapped numbers, and that other train went to certain death. Like, I'm laughing, but I shouldn't be laughing. But that so many decisions like that were made for every Holocaust survivor has this kind of story
Right.
where there was very close. If they had just done any of the other options that existed, they wouldn't be around anymore. But
Right.
somehow the war ended, and they're standing there wondering how they managed to make it through this horror, right?
Mhm.
So Cheng Pei-ming has a similar story in this respect, right? There's so many things. Like, he woke up, chained to a hospital bed
Oh my God.
with a 14-inch gash in his side, and a lot of pain inside, right? But he didn't know he had been harvested.
Oh my
Like, who
God.
would have guessed? Who would have? He
No.
didn't tell him, right? So, I mean, again, I shouldn't be laughing, but you can imagine, right? Like, just he himself is amused in retrospect, right, by this fact,
What did he
right?
lose? What did they take?
He lost part of his liver, about half of his liver, and a part of his lung. That's
Oh,
what they took. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and again, how did he live to tell the tale? Well, he survived that, and they wanted to operate on him again. He managed to escape through, again, sort of a amazing set of circumstances, hid in Thailand for a number of years, which has kind of been this halfway house. Actually, I was doing human rights work in Thailand at one point with this underground railroad that was bringing Chinese prisoners of conscience and dissidents through the Golden Triangle into Bangkok and finding them resettlement. And ultimately he was, of course the CCP was interested in finding him because he's living evidence, right? Living evidence. But he was rescued by Bob Destro, who was the former, back in Trump 45, he was the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Rights, and Labor. And he actually rescued him to America.
Wow.
So, and now he lives in hiding because, he's been kind of credibly threatened a number of times for his life. Don't talk about this because, so anyway, but he's living evidence. They've done multiple scans of him. And the crazy part, Naomi, is that, this is where regimes sometimes trip up. All they do generally with this issue is they just attack the messenger. They just say, this is evil. This is Falun Gong propaganda. This is whatever. There's many number of horrible things that they say. And by the way, slander works, which is part of the reason why it's such a prominent feature of Chinese Communist Party propaganda. It works in the sense that it gets us to wonder, maybe there is something wrong with that person. Why would be saying this terrible thing, right? So that all is reality. But they actually kind of tripped up, and they admitted to having operated on him officially. They said it was for a different reason. That reason isn't credible given the operation that he had. So we actually have an official admission of the Chinese Communist Party, kind of hospital medical leader saying, yes, we operated on this person, and he's missing part of his liver and part of his lung, and that's just the truth. And why did they do it? This is the other part, right? Like I actually had this conversation with David Matus, who's another one of the hero researchers of this whole process over the last 20 years. And I said, so why do you think, because you have this question, right? Like, first of all, why is this guy alive? Because living evidence, when people are committing atrocities, they don't generally like to leave the evidence. That's kind of a common reality, right?
Right.
In this case, a living person. And the second part is, it's just odd that they took part of his lung and part of his liver. Like, why? It doesn't seem like a normal thing you would do for a transplant, right?
Right.
And so, our theory is that it's some kind of an experiment because, as the Germans did experiments on their, black classes, so to speak, the Jews, gypsies, people who had, disabilities and so forth, they would basically treat them, this is why we know how long a human being can survive from hypothermia, for example, is from some of these horrible experiments that they did on people like this, right? It's absolutely astonishing that this guy is around to tell his tale.
Right. It is
absolutely astonishing that this guy's around to tell his tale. And what David Matus said is that it's kind of on the Chinese Communist Party itself to explain itself, which I thought this was a very interesting kind of retort. Because I said, so why? Well, like, why did they do this, right? He said, well, we could theorize about it, Jan, but actually, why don't they should tell us? Because they did it. Because implicit in the question, right? When you ask that question is like, I don't really believe it, right? I don't really believe that this happened. It's almost like that, right? And so, but really, they need to explain themselves.
Right. Well, will they? Can they? I mean,
but the point is they should. Like the responsibility shouldn't be on the human rights researcher to explain why this person is missing part of his liver and part of his lung.
Right.
The responsibility should be on the people who did it.
Absolutely. Well, this brings us, I can't believe our time together has flown by. I could talk to you for hours about this. Please come back if there's more, that needs to be said about this subject. I know there's so much more, but you guys, you've got to order this book like right away. Killed to Order: China's Organ Harvesting Industry and the True Nature of America's Biggest Adversary. But before I let you go, Jan, you've horrified us, you've stunned us, you've shocked us, 90,000, 80 to 90,000 maybe murders a year, for those transplants, or maybe some less because one person gets harvested in multiple ways. We don't know, but it's tens of thousands, clearly. Like, this is one of the biggest human rights violations maybe on the planet right now. right? What is bigger? I don't know of another country that's massacring, maybe 80 or 90,000 of its own citizens, or certainly not harvesting them. So what can we do, right? What mechanism is there? What's happening at the State Department? What can all of us do, and what's our country doing to stop this?
Well, so I actually have another appendix which I put in the book, which is all about this. Okay, but I'll explain some of it, both at a grassroots level for people that just are in their communities but think, hey, this might actually be important, right? There's all sorts of ways you can get involved. At the state level, there's state legislation and there's federal, and I'll explain that. But I think a big thing. So you've been brandishing my book, which I'm very grateful for. I'm gonna brandish the book.
We'll both brandish it
as well. The appendices, by the way, are in the back with the endnotes. I also provide a lot of references to the evidence and where you can find more information, because I don't put like the details are are massive around this. The book can be gotten at killedtoorder.com. Okay, killedtoorder.com. It's a short link to the Amazon link. We're kind of trying to create a movement with it. It's weird because I should have thought of this before and kind of written this into the book. But, if we can create enough buzz around it, like right now, as we speak, it's the #1 book 2 weeks out from being published in communism and socialism, and also in Asian politics, right?
Wow,
and that's amazing. So there's a big interest in it. But if we can make it kind of a bestseller, maybe even, I don't know if the New York Times will let it on its list, but maybe it will. That would be great. It'll just, millions more people will learn about this issue, right? Epoch Times, we've been promoting it. I'm not doing this for financial gain. I'm basically donating whatever royalties come from that effort to Epoch, right? Where it's really about trying to get the word out, because this is one of these things where if people understand it's real, if enough of a critical mass of people understand it's real, at the very least, we truly end our complicity to this. And when I talk about our complicity, I mean, we train some of those surgeons. We do, right? We provide technologies. We have funding relationships. There's all this stuff that is actually very easy to end, right? And all it takes is, enough people calling the senator. So why am I saying senator now? Well, so you asked me about what you can do. There's 2 pieces of legislation. I mean, this is also astonishing to me, right? Around this issue. The Congress has passed resolutions in the past basically saying, yes, this is real. But there isn't really much more than that. And we're troubled and China should change, but it doesn't really have any teeth. Well, now there's 2 pieces of actual legislation that have passed the House near unanimously, that one basically one of them is called the Falun Gong Protection Act. And in that piece of legislation, doesn't just protect the Falun Gong, it protects anybody who could potentially be harvested, right? But it started with the Falun Gong, and deeply unfortunately, after 14 or 15 years of inaction on anyone outside of China, almost, right? There's some action, just not a lot. They added the Uyghurs, right? So now we believe, and there's another book being written as we speak about this, that the Uyghurs have become a considerable, killed to order organ source of sorts, okay, as well. But so it'll help all those people, but it also says the US shouldn't be involved in the transplantation industry in any way. It's kind of as a general point of policy, and it sanctions some of the people that would be involved in that. We have that ability. We should do. This is the perfect use for this kind of legal instrument, so to speak. Okay, these are excellent pieces of legislation, both of them. They should be passed, and all it takes is for the Senate to vote on them and pass them. Because I think if they come to the floor, they're going to get passed.
Right.
They just know it's the most nonpartisan thing. Everybody should be able to get behind it. I don't see too many people voting against it.
Right.
Okay. That hence the near unanimous. There was one dissenting vote on one of the 2 bills. That's it. Everybody else was on board. So that's a real possibility for change. Phone calls to senators about Falun Gong Protection Act or the Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act, or both, very valuable. Okay. At the state level,
we can put those bills right into the description of this video through Bill Kim. Let me just try to understand before you move on. Are you saying the second bill says that the US shouldn't be involved in the transplant industry at all, meaning no more organ transplants for American patients?
No, they shouldn't be involved in the Chinese transplant
Ah,
industry.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure.
So the Falun Gong Protection Act, and I like the name of it, by the way, because I think, it increases the awareness that there's a particular group that's being targeted by a totalitarian government. So
Hmm.
I like that. I like the name of that bill, even though the bill is much broader than just protecting Falun Gong practitioners. They
Hmm.
were just kind of the main source of the organs for at least 15 years, if not to today. We don't really know at this point, since this new group of Uyghurs was added and possibly others.
Right.
So that bill is focused very much on China. It has this kind of policy statement, but not specifics, right? That could be fleshed out.
Hmm.
Um, it also has these sanctions. The Stop Forced Organ Harvesting Act, that is a broader bill. It's about organ harvesting more broadly, not just on China, but with a particular focus on the fact that China has a more egregious version of it.
Hmm.
Both bills are excellent in my opinion, and should be passed.
Fantastic.
And it
That's
would be,
great.
you're by all means, put those up. And by the, at the administration level, I'll mention this, right? Like, basically, we could have a rule. This could be by executive order. This could be, an NIH decision about not funding any institution that's in any way involved in China organ transplantation, stopping training these surgeons that have been trained, stopping providing technologies, materials, any of that. Just literally stop any engagement. And generally I'm not an isolationist. I'm for engagement. Like, but when it comes to organ transplantation, it really at this point doesn't make sense until China provides. Not China provides, until an independent
Mhm.
party
Mhm.
is allowed to assess it. China provides access to an independent party to
Right.
be able to assess that they've actually stopped, because there's
Right.
no way I would ever believe they've stopped unless someone can meticulously figure that out and it's not a subterfuge. Because listen, in 2015 they even pretended they created an organ donor registry. They said, oh, now we're not using prisoners anymore, now we're using real donors. But when the researchers looked at the data and they found it to be a perfect quadratic equation, they fudged the data and they didn't even do it particularly elegantly, right? It was just like an obvious fabrication. So
God.
this is kind of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
At the state level, Naomi, 6 states have now passed legislation that basically says we, insurance companies, Medicaid, Medicare, should not pay for China transplants. Like
Wow.
no brainer legislation. There's actually a third bill even in the House now in committee that is similar to that approach at the
Mhm.
federal level. 44 states to go. If you're a state legislator, if you're somehow involved in state level politics, there's model legislation out there. Get these bills passed. We got 46 states to pass that bill. Okay.
Amazing.
Um, and actually at the grassroots level, I don't know. Have you ever been involved in Rotary, Naomi?
Yeah.
So Rotary clubs, I used to do international youth exchange programs, run them. Rotary clubs were always a blessing because they were kind of community leaders in small communities. You can always count on them to help you out, find host homes for some of the young people you're working with. Well, Rotary has really stepped up, and what they've done is they created a satellite club, which
Mhm.
is exclusively focused on ending forced organ harvesting. And
Mm.
these clubs exist, all over the place. Here in
Wow.
the DMV, in the Washington D.C. area, there's many small towns around. There's a Rotary Club,
Mm.
and also like in many countries, it's more of kind of an elite thing. But in America, it's very democratic. Almost anyone can join a Rotary Club and play a part, and then step up into this satellite Rotary Club that's committed to ending forced organ harvesting. They're showing
Yes.
films. They're raising awareness. Remember what I was saying?
Incredible.
Like with the book, I'm hoping it's like a massive tool, right, to raise awareness.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
actually, let me mention this one more thing. On March 16th, if you happen to be in the DMV in the Washington D.C. area, like by an amazing, I don't know, like God smiling on us or something, right? But the Trump Kennedy Center is having a very large event. It's Rob Schneider and myself talking about this issue. Rob Schneider has actually gotten behind it. I mean, again, it he found it to be important and he wanted to champion it, which I'm incredibly grateful for.
Amazing.
And so we're having this conversation in the concert hall, in Kennedy Center, Trump Kennedy Center now. and and we have space for 2,000 people.
Wow.
The first 1,000, thanks to a very generous donor, are going to get a book
Oh,
that come in the door. And I just want to welcome people to become part of the movement, right? And again, if that is, it's already kind of starting to look really good in terms of interest,
mhm.
right? But if that room is really packed, again, it'll help create a lot of buzz,
Yeah.
and people will be able to talk, and we can kind of bring this issue out of some form of relative obscurity into something that everyone knows about, and that will play a major role at ending it, or at the very least ending our own complicity in it. For anyone out there that's thinking to themselves, I don't really like to interfere with what other countries are doing, I could give you a lot of arguments why it's good to, when it comes to crimes against humanity, but
Mhm.
because it spreads. That's kind
Mhm.
of
Right,
basically the argument. Like, it spread
right,
from the Falun
right,
Gong to the Uyghurs.
right.
Now I'm worried it's spreading to the Christians. That's a whole different discussion, which we could have in another place. But even if you don't believe in that intervention, at the very least, we can say we're not going to be a part of this in any way. And that itself would be very powerful and put a dent in the whole system. So let's be part of the movement.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, Jan, what an excellent call to arms. Very concrete steps everyone listening can take. And you can also enlist your loved ones, of course, by ordering the book, sending it to them on Kindle or PDF or Audible, or many, many ways to order the book. And I agree with you, Jan. You've given us very easy steps that we can take to save a lot of lives and stop that from metastasizing in a way that's going to affect all of us, everyone all over the world, as the definition of death gets redefined and everyone gets turned into a source of raw material instead of a human being.
And what we can do is right in here, both as an appendix and part of a major part of a chapter. So there's more.
You've done
There's
such a good
more. Yeah.
job. I would never want to say that a book like this is page turner, but it actually is. So, Jan, I have to let you go now so I can thank our sponsor. But I do want to say, as you know, Daily Clout is behind you 100%, and we will continue to broadcast anything you give us. Keep your book access right there on our homepage. We're going to be putting the links to those bills in our articles as we send them out. We're getting behind Jan Jekielek and this incredibly important book, Killed to Order. Make it a bestseller, you guys. Drive it up the bestseller rank so that even the New York Times and the Washington Post has to feature it. Jan, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for a wonderfully important book. I'm going to say goodbye to you now and take you from the studio so I can thank our sponsor. Okay, thank you so much.
Naomi, thank you so much. Killtoorder.com is where the book is. Killtoorderevent.com is where the Trump Kennedy event is. Thank you. You're awesome.
Okay, thank you, Jan. Take care. Bye-bye. Oh my gosh, you guys, what a lot to process. It's kind of overwhelming. Just when you think, you know what Satan is up to, you learn a whole other aspect of it. And I do think that what Jan said about, the part of our discussion where we were talking about, once you redefine that clear line between life and death, anything is possible. You can traffic anyone for anything. Humans become animals, essentially. Satan wants that. That is the, if you could put Satan's goal in one sentence, that's it. So I do think we all have to get behind Jan's movement and do everything we can to raise awareness about this issue and stop it. So Wall Street doesn't want you paying attention to this, but right now China controls 98% of the world's gallium supply. Have you never heard of gallium? That's the point. It's the critical material behind next generation semiconductors, and Beijing has been using it as leverage in the global tech war. But here's the twist. A tiny American company just developed breakthrough gallium nitride, or GaN technology, that could make China's grip irrelevant. Silicon chips, they've hit a wall. Even NVIDIA CEO says Moore's law is dead. But GaN chips use up to 40% less energy than silicon chips. They charge 3 times faster, and they can deliver dramatically higher performance than traditional silicon. And this small US firm holds 250 American patents on this technology. Now, major global brands, including NVIDIA, Samsung, Dell, Lenovo, and LG, are already partnering with them. This isn't about politics. It's about better technology winning. An investing expert just released an urgent presentation explaining why the next 12 months could be critical and why regular investors need to discover the name of this under the radar company before the wider market also catches on. So watch the full briefing now at ganrevolution.com. That's ganrevolution.com. Don't miss it. And there's one other announcement I need to make. American Alternative Assets. If you take a drive through any major city after sunset, you'll notice something really strange is going on. Dark windows, empty offices. And so right now, 1 in 5 commercial buildings in America is sitting vacant, and nearly $1 trillion in real estate loans are coming due this year. If those buildings stay empty, the banks take the hit. And those are some of the same banks where your retirement savings likely sit. There's a new free report called the Ghost Tower Signal that breaks it all down. It uncovers 7 early warning signs that showed up before every major crash since 1929. All 7 are active again right now. This won't make the evening news, but it could help you protect your savings from what is coming at us. Download it for free at cloutgold.com. That's CLOUTGOLD.com, or call 855-803-GOLD to get your copy mailed to you. You've got to do it, you guys. You've got to inform yourselves. As I always say at this point, if Brian and I had invested in gold 5 years ago when we first realized we could, we would be looking at having quintupled our investment today. So we're not making that same mistake again. You've got to diversify if you possibly can. And American Alternative Assets is a fantastic company to work with, very respected, very transparent. We're really proud to be sponsored by them. Cloutgold.com. Love you guys. Remember, if you care about conversations like this, we really need your support. Go to Outspoken on Substack.com. Please become a paid subscriber if you possibly can. We've got 119,000 subscribers. A tiny fraction of those are paying a subscription fee. It's very hard to keep producing this content without more subscribers who will pay. So please do subscribe. I haven't put up a paywall because I think these conversations are so important, but I need your help to keep doing that. So help me out, please, by becoming a paid subscriber over there. And over on Daily Clout, if you subscribe, you'll get independent journalism as well as access to archives, our network, Daily Clout Media, independent commentators, which are in the top 200 most popular podcasts in many countries right now. All 3 of our podcasts are. So, but that matters. I mean, these are countries where, they're so heavily censored that if they can't hear us, they're not hearing what's going on in the world. We need support to keep that going. So become a sponsor or a subscriber at dailyclout.io, or you can make a one-time donation over there as well. Please do. If you get the media you support, it's that simple. And independent media needs your help, like ours needs your help, in order to keep bringing you heavily censored conversations and reporting like this. You're not going to see this on the Washington Post or the New York Times. Please help us keep our doors open, keep reporting and opining for you. Love you guys. I will probably see you tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us.